Hello, hello, hello. I'm a few minutes late tonight. I'm a little tired. We was lifing today. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what happens after the 3-day notice. So last week, I talked about the 3-day notice to pay it quick, walk through the steps. So tonight, we're going to be talking about what happens after the 3-day notice to pay it quick if you did not pay your rent or if you paid your rent, what happens next? So we're gonna be talking about that tonight. Hope everyone is doing well. Most leases, not all, most leases, rent is due on the first. You get a grace period to the fifth to pay. After the fifth of the month, you get what's called a 3-day notice, and that's a notice that the landlord owner gives you to pay rent. So there's no law that states that the landlord has to give you a grace period. So this is when your lease comes in handy for you to understand what's on your lease and know when rent is due and if they're giving you a grace period. So some, they don't have to give a grace period. Rent is due on the first, I mean, you got to pay on the first. You get a 3-day notice on the second. But most standard leases is we get rent is due on the first, we give you to the fifth to pay. That's most standard leases. So tonight we're going to talk about what happens after the 3-day notice, and that's when the eviction process normally starts, and that's called an unlawful detainer. So let me slow up, back up some before we get there. So tonight I'm going to break down what happens next after the 3-day notice, and I'm going to do it like last week. I'm going to talk to renters, and then I'm going to talk about for landlords what happens next, so everyone understands the process without panic. So if you got the 3-day notice, take a deep breath. That don't mean you're getting evicted. Let's talk about it. So just a quick housekeeping disclaimer. This applies to California. Rules may vary by city and county. This is educational information only. I do not file paperwork or provide legal advice. My goal is clarity. So let's start with the renters. What happens next? So step one, the 3-day notice has expired, meaning if rent was due on the first, you had to the fifth to pay. It is now the sixth of the month and you have not paid rent. What happens after the 3-day notice expires? So let me explain that just a little bit clearer. So rent is due on the first, you get to the fifth to pay. The sixth, you typically get a 3-day notice. They have 3 business days. That don't include weekends. It doesn't include holidays. So for example, if rent is due on the 5th, you're going to get a notice on the 6th. If this is February, you're going to get the notice on the 6th. Saturday and Sunday does not count, and you don't usually count the day you give the notice. So your 3 days is actually starting on Monday, February 9th. So you have 3 days. You got the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th to pay. On the 12th of the month, you could get sent to evictions or the unlawful detainer could start. It varies by month because it really just depends on when Saturday and Sunday, what day the days fall on. Most leases you get to the 5th to pay. The 6th, you get a 3-day notice because of the weekend, because the 6th is on a Friday. Your 3-day notice doesn't start until Monday. So that's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You have to pay your rent. So that's giving you an extra 5 days if you include the weekend to get the rent paid. Once you get a 3-day notice, if you pay the rent that's on the 3-day notice, then they have to honor it. They have to take it. So they can't be, no, I don't want it. I want you to leave. Not by law. They have to take it. Long as you're given the rent amount that's on the note. And this is crucial because right now, today is February 5th, right? So starting tomorrow, some people may be getting some 3-day notices. So this is going to be some on-time information for you. So once the 3-day notice has expired, so on the 12th, On the 12th, the landlord could send you up for evictions or start the unlawful detainer. Just because you get sent up for eviction doesn't mean you're getting evicted. And we're going to talk about that tonight. So on the 12th of the month, the landlord, if he chooses, he could send you up to start the unlawful detainer. If he does that, and I'm going to be mixing unlawful detainer and eviction, they're the same thing. Unlawful detainer is the proper lingo. Keep in mind, not an attorney, but that's the proper lingo of the paperwork, unlawful detainer. So if the rent is not paid exactly as stated, now let's just going back on the 3-day notice, your rent equals just rent only. It doesn't include late fees. It doesn't include pet fees and any other fees. It's just rent only. So long as you pay the rent on the 3-day notice within that 3 days, you're okay. But if you don't, let's talk about it. So the tenant, you can either pay the rent exactly as is. You can move out. That's the quit part, pay rent or quit. You can move out. Nothing happens. No payment, no move out. Only in the third situation does the landlord consider next steps. So the landlord doesn't have to send you up for eviction. That's their right if they choose to, but they don't have to. So that's why it's important to communicate with your owner, with your landlord on your situation, what's going on. I would do it in writing. I would send an email. I would send a text message. Hey, I sent you an email. Email is better than text, but I know a lot of times we do text, but make sure you follow up that text with the email if you have their email address, and hopefully you do. So nothing happens automatically. So the owner has to take the steps to send you up for eviction. So eviction does not start with the notice. An eviction starts when a landlord files an unlawful detainer. So just because you got a 3-day notice, that doesn't that the eviction hasn't started yet. Court papers are served. So the owner, he sent you in. So court papers are served. So this means that the owner filed the unlawful detainer, and then you're going to get some papers delivered to your job, or not delivered to your home, or sometimes to your job. A process server is hired, and they will try to reach you at home. Sometimes they'll come up to your job just to serve you the paper. So if a case is filed, the tenant must be formally served court papers. This is different from the 3-day notice. From is actual court papers and documents that has to be filed. So the deadlines are short on it, just like that 3-day notice. So pay attention. You have some counties are different in California. I'm going to do Northern California, Alameda County, because I'm most familiar with that. 5 days. You have 5 days to respond to those papers. Sometimes you get up to 10 days, but within 5 to 10 days, you need to respond to the paper. If you want to buy yourself more time, respond. If you don't, it just go automatically through. If you don't respond, you don't say anything, the eviction is a lot quicker. But if you respond, this is why I haven't paid rent or things like that. Just don't come up with anything, but be truthful. But if you put on there some things that the reason why you didn't pay your rent is going to buy you time. Now, the court, they don't look at that and be, oh, that's not a good enough reason, or no. I don't think they do that. I don't think they have the manpower to do it. But long as you put a response in there, it delays the eviction process and it buys you some time. So let's just recap that. You get papers served to you. You have 5 up to 10 days. Don't quote me on the days because each county is different. So 5 to 10 days to respond to the paperwork. So step 4, options still exist. Even after a case is filed, options may still exist, including payment plans. You can make a payment plan with the owner. Rental assistance. There are some rental assistant companies in there. I know in California, no matter what county you in, if you call 211, like you would call 911 or 611, if you call 211, that's like a social service. So they'll let you know if there's rental assistance available in your county. They help you if you're behind on your PG&E bill, your water bill. They'll give you resources. So it's like a community resource number, 211. that you could call. So you could call them and ask them if there's any rental assistance. I would probably call them before I'm in need of it, right? Because sometimes those takes a little bit long. I have had some of my tenants call those and they actually got it. So call for rentals assistance. And I didn't give my disclaimer for those. Anybody new here, my name's Itanya. I've been doing property management for 25 years. I've been a realtor for 7 years, and I manage a building currently in the Bay Area of 39 units. So this is educational, not legal, but I'm just letting you know things that I've seen, learned over my 25 years working in this business, right? So your options: make a payment plan with the owner, rental assistance, see if you could get some help, negotiate the move out if you're deciding to move out, but you can't be out in 3 days. Tell them, hey, I'm going to leave. Can I have, and be realistic. I could be out in a week. I need 2 weeks, you know. Be realistic if you plan on quitting, pay or quit, if you plan on leaving. Errors that delay or dismiss the case. So those are things that could happen if the owner didn't fill the paperwork out correctly, it didn't get filed correctly. Those are things that could delay the case, which means you could be in the unit longer until you're properly served correct. So knowledge buys time, time creates option. So you want to make sure you file an answer to the paperwork. This isn't the time to be like embarrassed or panicking or thinking you're getting evicted because you got that unlawful detainer. So just make sure that you're responding and you're not ignoring it. This is important. Whether you get to stay or not, or whether you get evicted or not, whether how much time you have. Okay. Okay. So that was for my renters. So just to recap, just real quick for the renters, once the 3 day notice expires, you could pay the rent exactly as it says on a 3 day notice. You can move out or nothing happens. It just depends on the owner if they file the unlawful detainer. When the eviction actually starts, you will get papers, court papers are served to you. Reply to the papers. It varies by county, but you get 5 to 10 days to respond to that paperwork. Some counties it may be shorter, some counties it may be longer. So know what your county is, what the rules are. How you find that out? There's going to be information on those court papers. Call them. And it usually tells you on the court paper, you have 10 days to respond. You have, and if it's, I know, I'm not sure about other counties, but in Alameda County, not only does that, it tells them how long they have, but it also gives them some attorneys that they could call. And some of these attorneys are pro bono, they or low cost attorneys. I will recommend that you get an attorney if you get a 3 day notice to help you through the process. Unless you are practicing law and you know your counties and you all into the law, then you could probably bypass it. But if not, get you an attorney. And like I said, for the tenant, most of the attorneys are either free or low cost. Okay. So now I'm going to shift to my landlords. Let me know if anyone has any questions. I'm going to shift to my landlords. What happens after the 3 day notice and now your tenant did not pay rent? What are the next steps that you will take? So this is for the landlord. What happens next? So it's deciding whether to file. You don't have to, no one's making you. You could try to negotiate with your tenant, but if you do file, once again, I'm going to recommend that you get an attorney to help you file because any little mistakes could delay it. It could get, it's costly. It costs to file. It costs, I know it costs to get an attorney, but the landlords, there's not as many attorneys available for you for free or low cost. There are some that's low cost, but most of the time you're looking for a landlord tenant attorney if you're calling or you're Googling or you're trying to find you an attorney and you don't have one, landlord tenant attorney. I'm not sure if your court will have a list of attorneys. I don't think they supply those, but the word is landlord tenant attorney and you want to do an eviction. So you're filing an eviction is a choice. It's not an automatic step. You want to make sure there's accuracy of the notice. You want to make sure that you're following local city protections, rental assistant activity, documentation. So if your tenant is communicating with you and they're seeking rental assistance and they can show proof that they getting it, they just waiting for the check to come, then you may not want to go through the eviction process because the eviction process is timely and it's lengthy. And I'm going to be talking about some of the counties and how long it takes for eviction to go through in a few minutes. So once you file, you're in a court timeline. So once you file, it just depends. Like I said, I'm in Northern California. I'm very familiar with Alameda County. So once you file, it depends on if the court is backload, if there's a lot of evictions. It's just a whole bunch of factors that goes into how long the eviction process is going to take, right? Or if you're filing it yourself, if you're filling out the paperwork, which you can, you fill out the paperwork, you submit it to the county, you hire a process server to serve the notice to the tenant, you don't do it, and you could do that. That's your right. So filing an unlawful detainer at a high level, filing involves court paperwork, filing fees, supporting documentation like the 3-day notice and the proof of service. That's when that proof of service comes in. Well, that's when the proof of service really comes in handy when you're filing a unlawful detainer and you're waiting for service and response deadline. So if your tenant responds, like I said, to the tenants, they have about 5 to 10 days. That varies by county. So if they respond, then you're waiting that period, right? Errors here cost time and money. So if your paperwork is wrong and the court is like, this is wrong, and they say you got to redo it, then you start the eviction process over. You're filing those fees again. So you want to, that's why I'm saying if you can, get you an attorney to help you out because the laws, it changes all the time. So you could have filed the eviction 5 years ago, heck, even a year ago, and it's going to be different. Alameda County, they're being more stricter on the paperwork. So make sure that you understand what's happening and what's going on in your area and in your county, right, when it comes to the eviction paperwork. So proper serve matters. Improper service, either of the notice or the court papers, could delay or dismiss a case. So precision matters more than speed. So make sure that the paperwork is correct if you're doing it yourself. Some counties, most counties have self-help and it's a lot of reading and instructions, especially if you don't know how to do it. But they have a self-help. Most counties courts on their website have that to help you through this process. So for those just joining, let me know if you have questions. I just talked about what happens after the 3-day notice for the renters. Now I'm doing it for the landlords. I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice. This is educational only. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm just sharing my knowledge of what I've seen and been through with the eviction process. So what can delay or stop a case for landlords? So common issues include incorrect rent amount, improper notice language, a local ordinance violation, tenant response, rental assistance applications. Most delays come from process mistakes. So you want to be careful. Make sure that you are properly serving the notice and that is filled out correctly. Okay. Did I beat that with the horse enough? So just to recap for the landlord, right? you want to decide whether to file. If you could work this out with the tenant, that's going to be the best bet. If the tenant, if they can make a payment arrangement, if you guys could come up with an agreement, that's going to be your best bet, because filing an eviction, an unlawful detainer, is timely and costly. Timely and costly. So let's go into some eviction timeline. So, because this could surprise people. That's why I'm saying, landlords, if you can work it out with the tenant, if you can, it's timely and it could be costly for you if you gotta move or whatever the situation is. Let me give you a couple of examples of things that I personally went through. So what we used to do, if we sent someone up for eviction and they wanted us to stop the eviction, we would stop it on one condition: that they pay all the rent and all the fees that they owe up until that point, plus our attorney fee. Yeah, plus the attorney fees. So, usually at that time, so for example, I'm going to give you my company, we're on a retainer with an attorney, so the prices may be different from other people, but for other cases, but for us, attorney, um, at this point, if we're having a tenant, if we're going to accept to stop the eviction, it depends on where we are in the eviction process too. This is why renters, is so important for you to communicate with the landlord on, hey, I got the money. Can we make a payment plan? Can we negotiate that? Communicate what's going on. So if we stop the eviction, we will ask for all the rent, all the fees, and the attorney fees. So our attorney fees at this point could be anywhere from $1,500 to $1,700 that the renter would have to pay on top of the rent, on top of the other fees to stop the eviction. However, where I work at now, I have an owner. She don't want us to stop the eviction. So if I send you in for eviction after the 3-day notice, and I'm trying to communicate with you because I don't want to go through the process, and I don't want to see you go through that process either, or getting evicted, because I know that once I send you up for eviction, we don't stop it. And that means you will have to leave eventually. Now, I'm going to go into some timeline. So I try to prevent that, and I do my best. Hey, do you have the rent? How much can you get? Let me try to help you through the process. Let's try to not get you evicted. And I did all of that. I talked to the resident. Hey, I just want to give you heads up. If you don't pay this rent by this day, we're going to send you up to eviction. If we send it up to evictions, we don't stop. And that happened. I tried to warn this person. They didn't take to my warning. We sent them up for eviction, and then they wanted to start communicating and start doing this. I said, you're too late. It's too late. They was embarrassed. They didn't want to tell their parents. I said, borrow the money. See if you could get a loan from friends or family or your job. Pay it. He didn't do it. So let's talk about timeline. So counties are different. So these are rough estimates. So generally, the California range for eviction is 30 to 45 days. That's for a very straightforward case. So you didn't respond to the notice, you didn't communicate or anything to the paperwork. I told you 5 to 10 days to fill it out. You didn't fill it out. So straightforward, 30 to 45 days. This is after the court filing, not including the notice period. So let me give you a few counties and timelines of real life, what's actually happened. Alameda County, including Oakland. Oakland. I was raised in Oakland. I'm a East Oakland girl. I love Oakland, but we have some of the most strictest tenant protection laws around. And Oakland has a whole bunch of different, but anyway. So Alameda County, 60 to 120 days is common for eviction. So 60 to 120 days. So what's that? 2 to 4 months? I'm seeing most of my evictions, especially when they file an answer, is closer to 4 months. So that means that the tenant is here. They're not paying rent. I can't accept money from them, where I have to start this whole process over again. but they're staying in this unit of ours for up to 4 months waiting for a court date. It was a little bit shorter. I sent someone up in December of 2025. I go to court for them February 11th. So that was less than 60 days. So 60 to 120 days for Alameda County, Contra Costa County. This is also in Northern California, 45 to 90 days. San Francisco is often 90 days plus. Los Angeles County, 60 to 120 days. Due to the court volume, Los Angeles has a lot of cases, so they're behind. So those are just some of the counties. That's not all the counties in California, just some of the counties. So that's giving you 60 to 120 days. It's pretty much the norm. And that's not the waiting. That's like the waiting period from the time you file the unlawful detainer until you go to court. And I'm going to talk about this later, the next steps once you go to court, because that's a whole fiasco. I'll probably, because I'm actually going to court next week, I'll probably do some lives on that process and what it looks like and talk about that next week. I go to court on Wednesday for eviction. So those are some of the timelines. Alameda County, 60 to 120 days. Contra Costa County, 45 to 90 days. San Francisco, 90 plus days. Los Angeles County, 60 to 120 plus days, depending on the court volume. And it also depends on the time of year and when you're getting evicted for that process. I just went over the process. What happens after you get your 3-day notice? So if your situation feels more complex, you got some court papers, some deadlines, some local laws, you don't understand it. I'm not an attorney, but I do offer one-on-one clarity calls where we could kind of talk about your situation. I could help you understand what's going on, point you in some directions to kind of help you along the process. So you can schedule a clarity call with me. I have a stand store. It's like stand store. I'm going to put the link in the comments. If you need help with that, or if you have questions, you could ask questions in the comment and I'll answer them. I don't have 1,000 followers yet, so I can't put the link in the bio, so I have to put it in the comments. So if you're listening to this, just like, so I can get you 1,000 followers. I'm more than halfway there, and TikTok is allowing me to go live because normally you need 1,000 followers before you could go live. So you could book a clarity call with me. If you have additional questions, you want me to give you some tips on your situation or help you understand it more. These calls are educational only. I explain the process, timelines, what questions you should be asked, but I do not file paperwork. So I do not file unlawful detainer paperwork. I don't prepare the documents. Think of it as understanding the roadmap before deciding your next step. I recommend counsel on both sides, whether you're the renter or the tenant. I recommend that you get that. And I'm going to talk about that in the next call, what that looks like when after the 3-day notice has expired, you're in the eviction process. What are your next steps while you're in the process? So I'm going to talk about that and break that down next week and talk about some of the things that I've seen that attorneys have asked on behalf of the renter, and also some of the stuff that the landlord goes through when they get an attorney. So the eviction law is technical and small mistakes could. The eviction law is technical and small mistakes can have big consequences. So my role is definitely education and not representation. Eviction law is technical and small mistakes could have big consequences. So my role is education, not representation. So what I'm going to also be having, if you go to my stand store, I have some free stuff on there. I have the 2026 California housing laws. I have a free checklist on all the laws that went to effect this year in 2026. I also have a free renter checklist on the 3-day notice process, red flags, green flags to look out. I also have a free landlord cheat sheet on the 3-day notice on how to making sure that you have all this information in your 3-day notice, all educational. And then I'm going to be having a free checklist on the eviction process on what happens. I really like it. It's like a little guide that kind of walks you through if you get the 3-day notice, then you go here. So that's going to be coming as well, and that's going to be free for you as well for you to download in my stand store. So to support this education, I'm going to upload the free checklist. It's not going to be uploaded to next week, but it's coming. And what it's going to include is what happens after the 3-day notice, timelines to expect, common mistakes, what to watch for next. So this checklist is meant to keep you informed and organized, not to replace legal advice. So in closing, I just want to say the biggest takeaway for tonight is a 3-day notice is not an eviction. So even though you got a 3-day notice, you could prevent evictions from happening. Eviction is a process, and understanding gives you power. So that's what tonight was, so you can understand what happens after the notice, what happens even if you get sent to eviction. And just because my company, to stop eviction, we had you pay the attorney fees or we wouldn't stop the eviction. That doesn't mean your owner and landlord won't do that. So it's most important to catch them before that paperwork is filed because it's costly and time consuming. Like I said, if what we say 60 to 120 days, that means you're staying in that unit rent free. And that sounds great up until the point up until the point to where now what happens when you go through the eviction process and now you have to go find a place to live. And let me just say this, just a little side note, anti-advice or something. And I say I usually don't give advice, but if you get a 3-day notice and you're not going to pay the rent, don't spend the money. Don't spend the money. Don't go out and start doing a shopping spree because eventually you're going to have to move and you're going to need that money and you're going to need to pay rent somewhere because you won't be able to stay where you're staying at for free for too long. So try to stop the eviction before it happens. Don't spend the money if you do. And also this is important because when you go to court or in Alameda County, we do something called settlement court. But when you go to court, you may say, I have all the money up until that point. So if it took, let's just say for numbers, 60 days for you to get to court, you could be okay. I have 2 months of rent already ready to go, plus all the additional fees I owe. Can I stay? And they may say yes. They may, but if you go out and you spend the money, you don't have nothing to bargain with. So don't spend the money. Save, try to get the money the best you can. Communicate with your owner and let them know I have the rent. Can you stop the eviction if you get to that point? So education gives you time gives you options. As I said before, my free eviction checklist is going to be up probably next week. And if you need clarity, housing clarity calls, and even if it's not about the eviction, but if you have something else going on, you could schedule a call with me. I have 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And once again, this is educational information only. I do not file paperwork or provide legal advice. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments and the chat. And if not, then I am going to post the stand store in the comments. Give me a few minutes after this live. I'll post the stand store in the comments and then you could download those free resources. So right now what's uploaded is 2026 Housing California Laws, a landlord cheat sheet on 3-day notices, and if you got a 3-day notice for renters, I got a checklist on there for you. So thank you for joining me tonight. This is Real Estate by Tanya, where I talk about life, leases, and law. And I've been doing property management for 25 years, a realtor for 7, and I currently manage a building in the Bay Area of 39. So thank you for joining me where we just discuss what happens after the 3-day notice. Night.